Hello and welcome to Homeland Security Today's dedication to World Refugee Day, which is June 20th and is sponsored by the United Nations. World Refugee Day has been recognized for decades now and is a celebration of refugees and their contributions and needs around the world. So I don't know if the term celebration is exactly the one I would use, but that's how the UN has deemed it. So we have been very, very engaged in refugee issues, human trafficking issues at Homeland Security today. And with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, we have taken a very active role in sharing information and certainly providing actual relief. And one of our really esteemed and wonderful partners in this mission is World Hope International. And today we're very happy to talk with Nancy Green, who is the Chief Development Officer for World Hope International and has been an incredible partner to Homeland Security today's efforts to bring relief to the refugees and to the Ukrainian people. So welcome, Nancy.
Thank you so much for having me, Christina. It's a pleasure.
Well, I appreciate you joining us. World Refugee Day is certainly one that we all honor in different ways. And this year, you're seeing a tremendous number of refugees all around the world for reasons like the Russians invading Ukraine, but drought, famine, the situation in Syria, all of these things have displaced millions of people. So it's great to see the work you're doing and the support you're providing to people all around the globe, and especially Ukraine. I mean, Ukraine is in everyone's mind right now, but tell us a little bit about your mission and your work around the world.
Yes, World Hope is a 25-year-old faith-based relief and development organization that was founded by Joanne Lyon. She was head of the Wesleyan Church for many years, and World Hope is now led by her visionary son, John Lyon. We were founded in 1996 as a result of the war in Sierra Leone. Joanne was very aware of the tragedy of the women and children coming out of that war. And she actually went to Sierra Leone during the war to find ways that she could provide support, mostly to people who were needing prosthetics as a result of the severe amputations that happened in that country. World Hope now focuses on 3 program pillars: clean water and energy protection, which is anti-human trafficking, and global health. And we are focused on key core countries of Sierra Leone, Liberia, Haiti, the Philippines, and Cambodia. Though we've worked in 30 countries or more over the years, we have scaled back to focus on our core competencies and the relationships and networks that we have in those regions.
So given Ukraine was not one of your core competencies, what drew you to that region?
The Ukraine disaster drew us because of the incredibly complex nature of the war, but also World Hope's partnership opportunities that we could bring to the region. World Hope has a lot of different partners, USAID, the government, Amazon, and other networks on the ground that allowed us to bring in millions of dollars worth of donated medical supplies to Ukraine and Moldova. We recognized that there was a tremendous need for clean water. The Russians had destroyed most of the infrastructure for clean water throughout the country. We were working with on-the-ground paramedics and soldiers and trained first responders who begged us to bring in medical supplies and clean water. Thus, our partnership with you to bring water filters that will provide a lasting support for individuals who are providing on-the-ground care to vulnerable people who are left in the country, in addition to those who are fleeing.
Absolutely, that was how we got introduced to, and they gave a incredibly generous match of $50,000 for water filters to Ukraine. And if you're following along on TikTok or at HS Today, you'll actually see our journeys. We've been over twice. First time to bring tourniquets and the second time to bring water filters. And we're gearing up for our third trip to bring the remainder of water filters over. Our fingers are crossed that we're almost at that 50,000 point. Thanks to Nancy and many of the efforts of all of you who have donated through HS Today or donated through Facebook, Meta, or wherever you've donated. The World Hope International is matching those donations. So we can't thank you enough for that, Nancy. So are there recurring challenges that you see? I mean, Ukraine is one area and then Africa is another. And so are there recurring challenges, and that's what makes you so well equipped to go around the globe?
Absolutely. Over the past 4 years, we've seen a rising increase in global disasters, hurricanes, earthquakes, in addition to the global pandemic that we've had to endure for the past 2 years. We have a staff of over 250 people around the world. And during that pandemic, many of those staff members had to quarantine, yet continue to serve the vulnerable people in all of our programs. So I think in terms of climate and the need for water and the need to respond to global disasters, whether they're earthquakes or volcanoes or even mudslides, we're seeing a rise in these global emergencies, which has really focused World Hope to increase our expertise in this area and to increase the number of partners on the ground that we're working with. Amazon is a tremendous partner. Whenever we have a global emergency in the world, Amazon actually contacts us and says, what do you need? And we get those items shipped around the world and in the United States so that our communities can provide and distribute those needs. But what we're finding during all of these emergencies is that clean water for sanitation and drinking is of the utmost priority. During any global disaster, you have to keep people clean, you have to keep them hydrated to fight infection. And if you can't fight infection, you're headed down a road of severe health challenges. So that's why water and sanitation is one of our pillars and a priority for our work.
Excellent. Yes, we absolutely see that in Ukraine. When we started, all of our contacts reached out and needed tourniquets, and then it shifted quickly to water filters. So that pillar of your mission is really, really critical. So how does your staff augment the assistance in other countries? So when you get there, like, how do you plug into the communities that already exist?
Yeah, and that's one of the key, we say at World Hope, never alone. That's our mantra. We believe that it takes partnerships across community, government, church, schools to keep a program running well. So when we arrive in Moldova or when we arrive in Ukraine, our first go-to partner is local government, local water and sanitation, local ministries of health, who actually have poverty alleviation plans and can give us the exact needs that are required in emergency situations. We also know that schools and communities of faith have the pulse on the ground and they understand the needs of the local people. So we work with imams and pastors and community leaders who know the people that require assistance the most. So we really plug into those local networks. World Hope was really founded with a heritage in the Wesleyan Church, which is why when we are working on projects around the world, we can plug into our network of trusted Wesleyan and Methodist church leaders. It's absolutely essential for us.
That's excellent to have that type of network, especially if you are not necessarily familiar with the culture or the language. So I know that finding people who speak Ukrainian is at a premium, since, you know,
Right,
Ukrainian is
right.
only taught in public school, I think, in Canada. So there you go. But how do you
And
combat?
Christina, I'll also say that we really need to understand the context in which we're working, the
Yeah.
language, the culture. Context is important. You have to be able to respond to people where they are, not with the knowledge of just coming from the United States.
Absolutely. Well, that is so critical. I think that we'll have to highlight that somewhere, because many of the cultural mores that exist in the US do not exist in other places. And so you do need to send
Absolutely.
people who are sensitive to the fact that we are not in the US anymore and the concerns are different and the traditions are different. So I couldn't agree more. One of the things that I see us facing with Ukraine, and I'm sure that the Syrian community feels the same way, but it's kind of that refugee fatigue, or just fatigue over disaster generally. How do you combat that in, you know, in your work efforts, but also in your fundraising efforts? Because in the beginning of a disaster, or like at the beginning of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, you saw tremendous amount of money going into the country, and we still see that. The US just gave another billion to Ukraine. But how do you combat the fatigue for just the ordinary person who maybe, you know, they gave to Ukraine once and they're like, okay, I gave once, but the situation continues.
Right. And as a fundraiser, I've been raising money for 30 years. What I understand is that stories matter. They don't want, donors don't just want to know that we're sending money and that we're sending water filters or we're sending individual first aid kits. They want to know the lives that we are changing. So our staff on the ground try as much as possible to connect with real people, find out about the families, the children whose lives have been devastated, and how our help is making a difference. Donor fatigue is real. And the Ukraine invasion has probably raised more money than any natural disaster that's happened in the last 10 years. And it's also forced the greatest migrations and fleeing of people around the world. And I think those of us in the US are totally together with Ukraine and supporting that country in this tyranny. And then I personally and my team, we're a faith-based team, we pray. We pray a lot with our teams around the world to give us the resilience to keep going in the face of donor fatigue. It's not just fatigue about Ukraine, it's fatigue about Haiti, it's fatigue about US policy, it's fatigue about gas prices, all of it. We're facing enormous challenges in our world today. And so I pray.
That's wonderful. And it's so important to remember how blessed we are. And I know that, you know, on Meta and on Facebook, there's some memes going around when people complain about gas. They say, well, you could have your home destroyed and be, you know, a refugee in some other country. So we have a lot to be thankful for, that we even still have gas.
That's so true.
Yes. So being grateful for certainly everything we have, but we've seen a tremendous outpouring, as you said, from the US, from people here, from people all around the globe supporting Ukraine. I think in many respects, because this was a completely unnecessary, horrible invasion that not only reverberates for the Ukrainian community, but certainly for everyone around the globe, as Russia forces a famine. And anyone familiar with Ukrainian history knows that they took all the grain from Ukraine in the early 1930s and starved 7 million people. Some estimates are higher, some estimates are lower, but at the end of the day, that grain was taken and people starved to death, and they're doing it again. So we're not only seeing that invasion of Ukraine and the destruction of the beautiful cities and the historic sites, but we're also seeing that they're blocking food from the rest of the world. So your job has just begun. because when that famine hits Africa,
Absolutely.
yes. So yes, and it does seem overwhelming. So what is the best way for people to help?
In any emergency response, we get so many people who say, I've got clothes, I have books, I have shoes. How can I get those to you? And I say, thank you very much for that generosity. But during a global emergency like this, the best way that people can help is cash, because that allows us to purchase the necessary supplies, whether it's water filters or tourniquets, or medical supplies, and to get people where they need to be to provide the most help. So, you know, cash is king during an emergency response. If we have needed items for refugees, Amazon has been very generous to provide us with household goods, mattresses, and those things that people can use to set up refugee apartments in Moldova and Poland and other places. But for our work right now, we need to prioritize raising cash to keep our engines moving. We set up an office in Moldova to monitor the situation and to provide on the ground assistance to our people coming and going from the surrounding countries and in and out of Ukraine.
Absolutely. And in my experience, just in this short period of time, as we've raised funds to make our trips to Ukraine, to buy tourniquets, I can't agree with you more. Unfortunately, even though very well intentioned, you know, I know a number of organizations that have been inundated with things for children and all kinds of well-intentioned items, but the cost to ship those items and the people and man hours to sort them and to figure out what to do with them, and they're not priority needs. And so those efforts, while again very well intentioned, can really bog down some of the organizations on what to do with these things that are donated. I know that some of the organizations we work with here in San Diego, the House of Ukraine has been tremendous. They've accepted a tremendous amount of donations that, again, you know, are not priority to be shipped to Ukraine, but have certainly pivoted and are using them for the refugees. So that has pivoted, and that has helped, that has continued to help refugees that are coming to the US. But in general, financial contributions allow House of Ukraine, allow many organizations to pay for what's actually needed, and also to provide that kind of efficiency of scale. Because as an individual, you know, we have been literally taking suitcases over to Poland. So we've been paying for that out of pocket. We've had tremendous volunteers who've paid for their luggage and paid for their tickets to bring supplies to speed it up, because many of the traditional shipping routes are very overwhelmed and busy. So so I think a financial donation to any charity you like, World Hope International, to the Central Food Kitchen, to House of Ukraine, anything that would help them continue the work and make sure it's getting to the right people, which is a whole nother challenge. So I will ask you one last question, Nancy. How can we ease the road for refugees, or what more can we be doing?
I believe it's a global effort for all the countries involved to really advocate for peace in Ukraine. We need to stem the tide of people leaving. As I mentioned, the number of people fleeing and migrating around the world, whether it's war or food insecurity, is at an all-time high. One of the things I truly believe, and many of my colleagues believe as well, is that we have to find solutions for the countries where people are fleeing. We need to find an agreement with Russia and Ukraine that will provide stability and peace for that country. Otherwise, this tide of people leaving will continue unabated. And I think that's the case for refugees around the world. We need to solve the problems in Syria and different countries in Africa. People are leaving because they don't have access to water. They don't have access to food. So if we, as the global community of relief and development and working with poverty alleviation plans in those countries, we can address those core challenges on the ground, we'll be much more resilient in the future. I think we really have to work on resiliency of each of those countries. It's a complex problem.
Nancy, you've
With
just
so many
told
different
us,
tentacles.
yeah, well, you've just told us to solve poverty and stop war, which I think is a little, that's a little overwhelming last message for our people today. But I just want to thank you for all the work you and World Hope International is doing. John Lyon is tremendous. The son that you mentioned, we've been in contact with him, and he jumped right in to help us with our project to bring water filters. So we can't thank you enough for the work you do day in and day out. And if there's any way we can send you a bunch of pizzas to keep you going, you just let us know, because many times the people caring for others and the caretakers are not taken care of very much. So I hope you know how much really we all appreciate the work that you do day in and day out.
And Christina, thank you so much. You have been a champion working with us, working tirelessly to get those water filters there and to raise funds and awareness. And we appreciate your partnership with us, truly. Thank you.
Well, same back at all of you, and huge hugs. And hopefully next year on World Refugee Day, we'll be talking about the success of Ukrainians being returned to their homes, because that's all I hear from any of the refugees I meet in Poland or in Ukraine. They just want to go home. So while we're working on all the programs,
we need to find those safe passages.
That's right. That's exactly right. So again, thank you. And thank you for your work. And if you're interested in donating to World Hope International, the link is all over Homeland Security Today's website. We welcome your donations and support. So thank you again, Nancy, and we'll talk to you in a year.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, that's great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.